During COVID, I lost some family members that just thought I was killing grandma. I mean, they really
Mm.
believed that I was the devil killing grandma. And I had very close family members who wouldn't even come to my wedding. They just refused. They're now back in my life. We just agree to not talk politics. I mean, that's kind of where we have to be. And so that's, when you're saying, well, maybe you should just speak up. But I lost family members and I actually prefer having them back in my life. And I
Mhm.
would just prefer not to have any conversations about politics. And when they bring up their point of view, I just say, "Oh yeah, okay. Uh-huh." Like
Right.
I don't disagree with it's worse in my mind. It would be worse for me to disagree with them and then just go
Mhm.
get into a big fight. I mean, the fighting and the being cut off has got to be bad for your mental health.
Mm. Yeah, that well, the fighting and the being cut off are 2 different things, right? I would say the fighting in and of itself is not necessarily bad for your mental health, right? So being able to have, vehement disagreement and, vigorous debate, that's actually what I think is a truly safe space where people can have strong differences but still be friends. Like that's actually great. For example, as well in marriages, you know that they're in trouble not because of the presence of fighting, but often because of a stony quietness, right? Like that's usually more the death knell of marriages. However, to your point, is it sometimes better to just not talk about politics? That's fine, but there's a big difference between being open about the fact that, hey, you know what? We disagree about politics so much that we just simply have decided we're going to not talk about it and we're going to enjoy everything else about each other that we enjoy. That's a very different scenario than I never told you, and I just silently laugh at all your jokes that trash people like me because I pretend that I agree with you.
Mm.
It's very different than saying we can openly acknowledge that we disagree and we don't have to debate it. We can just accept it and not talk about it all the time. Like in therapy, I'll tell you if we come upon a topic and a client's like, "Well, I don't want to talk about that." One of the things the therapist might say is, okay, that's fine, but can you tell me why we don't talk about it?
Mm.
Just so I know that, so we can understand what that topic means and why we can't talk about it. Great. And then we can accept that. But to just simply never have even talked about that you don't talk about it is a whole other level.
I think the problem, the issue, and why people are hiding themselves is because society has really demonized the other side. I mean, it's not just we disagree politically, we vote for different people, we're on two sides, we have different disagreements on how things should be handled. It's you're a fascist, a Nazi, you're the devil. Like we have to stop you. It's beyond it's gotten to a point where it's just beyond political differences. It's now personal, it's character.
Yeah, that's true, and it's so ironic because I understand that in a way that would cause people to say, "Well, gee, let's just not talk about it." But ironically, um, when people don't talk, that's when they become more prone to violence. So again, as a psychologist, if you're working with a violent offender or like an anger management person or whatever, one of the first things you want to do is boost up their emotional vocabulary and teach them how to have dialogue and how to express themselves when they're at lower levels of frustration so that they don't hold it all in and then like burst out, right?
Yeah.
And so when people talk less, that's when, conflicts tend to fester. The issue that you also hit on there though that I think is a really important and kind of a separate issue is people throwing around these words, like fascist and Nazi and Hitler. I really think that stuff, needs to stop because obviously it's not accurate. Nobody's being, thank God, nobody's being in the United States marched off to the gas chambers. Nobody's losing their rights literally or,
Mm.
anything like that. I mean, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I just don't see that happening here. And so when we start calling each other those names, I do think young, impressionable people can start to take that literally. And then they like it's so again ironic, but that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk because he's so hateful,
Mhm.
right? And it didn't seem to occur to him, you're the fascist. If you're the person picking up a gun and shooting someone because you don't like what he says, you're the fascist, you know? So it's ironic, but I don't want to make it into a left right issue, but I do want to just share some interesting statistics with you that I think kind of prove this connection between a lack of dialogue and an increase in violence. And
Okay.
I don't think that there's anything, I just want to say, in leftist DNA that is inherently prone to violence. I think it's just again like a failure of messaging here, is like the escalation of these words like fascist and Nazi that are
Right.
causing people on the left to say, well, of course I don't want to talk to somebody who's a fascist or a Nazi.
Mhm.
Kim, I wouldn't want to sit down and have dinner with fascists and Nazis either, right?
Right.
But I share this in my book. I call it the 5 Ds. And people on the left are statistically much more likely to do all of them to conservatives than to the reverse over political differences. And the
Wait,
five,
but
oh,
just before you start, one
mhm.
question. Do you like, right, I agree that right now they are more likely, but I don't know if that's historically true.
Good
I think
question.
it flips
So
back and forth.
yeah, so that's a great question, and it's actually why pornography came up in the book, because there's a section called "Is this a Democrat Republican issue?" And I explained that in the past, Republicans were more likely to be censoring speech when it came to, like, say, rap lyrics or, porn issues, back in the 80s and things like that. But you're absolutely right. At this snapshot in time, it's going more from left to right. But I agree, this is not anything in the DNA of any political
Right.
party.
I think it
That's what.
swings back and forth, and that's like that's what I think we all should recognize, is that the pendulum continues swinging back and forth. Sometimes it's the right that does it to the left, sometimes the left does it to the right. That's why I brought up, I'm disheartened to see the right doing things now, because I do think that they're starting to shift themselves to where the left was. I'm seeing the same like rhetoric of, we have to stop these, now it's like these the trans death cult, like these, the left is so dangerous. We have to do something about them. And I agree with what you're about to say, which is that, when you start to have that rhetoric, right, and it really becomes like really inflammatory, people start to do something about it. And that's what's really dangerous. But I do think it swings back and forth. But I agree, like right now, it's been alarming. It's coming from the left.
Yeah, but we're all vulnerable to it. I
Yeah.
totally, yeah, like it's a human issue. It's a
Yeah.
human psychology issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, but so and the connection is that with the 5 Ds that currently, and according to recent polls, liberals are more likely to disinvite a speaker over political differences, defriend on social media, distance in real life, drop contact altogether, or decline to date across the aisle.
Hmm.
And according to the YouGov polls, liberals are also much more likely, like 2 to 8 times more likely, to endorse or celebrate violence as a political strategy to accomplish political goals. And I think that those two things are connected for the reasons I said earlier, which is that when people don't talk, that's actually how they settle differences. It's how they do emotional regulation, and it's how they, learn how to work alongside each other despite differences. When people stop talking, it's easier to demonize the other side because you don't know what they're thinking. And meanwhile, your own emotions are not regulating because you're not talking openly. And so I think it's kind of a powder keg of violence, that like the less we talk. So I really want to encourage people to
Hmm.
learn how to have dialogue. We all, at least I did, kind of grew up with this idea like it's not polite to talk about politics.
Right.
And to the point where we forgot how to talk about politics politely. And when you think about it, politics is just the public space and our views about the public space. How could we not talk about that?
Right.
It's crazy.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.